I was going through a rough divorce and decided to clear my head with a canoe camping trip. I planned to camp out for a few days and be picked up by my brother 12 miles downriver. This normally would have been an easy, leisurely trip, but my canoe should have been retired years ago. I drove out to my launch point and locked up my truck, unloaded the canoe, and took off downriver, knowing I would hit some small rapids a couple miles downriver. When I did, my canoe started taking on water. Between trying to bail water and navigate the rapids, my canoe overturned and I was carried downstream. All I know is that shortly after overturning, I blacked out. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I came to, I felt something pulling on the shoulders of my life jacket. My vision was still blurry as I looked up into the face of a very hairy person. When I reached up to touch my head, it came back bloody and my ankle felt a stabbing pain with every jostle. The hairy person pulled me to shore and left me alone under a tree. I was scared, not of this hairy person, because it seemed clear that it meant me no harm, but because I was right in the middle of grizzly and cougar country, badly injured, with no way to protect myself. I started calling weakly for help, shivering and moaning in pain between the calls. It wasn't long before the hairy person appeared again, carrying a long spear-like branch, along with several others. I didn't have the strength to sit up, and my body felt like it was slipping into a warm slumber. I heard some loud splashes all around me, and a fragrant smell reminiscent of Honey Nut Cheerios came up around me. I also heard a sound near my head, like that of a splat ball hitting the floor, and the strong odor that wafted towards me made it clear what they were doing. They were marking their territory. The warm fog of sleep finally overtook me, and I slept. When I woke up, the Honey Nut Cheerios smell was replaced with a strong ammonia odor. The fragrant territory marker by my head wasn't the only one. There were similar markers surrounding me as well. Near me was a small fire and a pile of wood, a pile of berries, and a crude clay bowl filled with water. Several hours must have passed because night had fallen and the forest behind me was dark. I was cared for, but alone. I felt battered and exhausted, but I knew that I needed to stay alert. That night I could hear movement in the forest behind me, and a cougar appeared 30 yards away. It circled my spot and came closer, but it didn't try to get much closer than about 10 yards. A bear appeared later, and it sniffed the air and turned away as well. The behavior of the wildlife made it clear that the territory markers were for my protection, and I made sure to stay within that area that night. I took short sleeping breaks throughout the night, trying to rest as much as I could. When I awoke around dawn the next day, I saw my sleeping bag and backpack next to me. The sleeping bag was dry in the stuff sack, but my backpack was wet. I had some non-perishable foods and a first aid kit in there that were still good to use, and I got busy cleaning my wounds and eating a granola bar. I felt I had some of my strength back, but since I didn't know how long I would be here, I rationed my food. I would need a little longer before I tried to hike back out with my swollen purple ankle. As the sun rose higher in the sky, one of the hairy humans appeared and looked at my gear surrounding me. This time I was alert and I took a close look at my caretaker. This one looked to be a male, and while it fit the description of what people called Bigfoot, I can't bring myself to call them by this name. These hairy humans were clearly intelligent, and to call them Bigfoot, the great North American ape, felt like an insult to this intelligence. His eyes settled on my knife and he gestured towards it. I handed it to him, and he turned it over in his massive hands, looking at it closely. He stopped looking and handed the knife back to me, but I pushed it back towards him. I wanted him to have it, and considering the spear the other one had, I figured it would be useful to him. Out of the forest, the one with the spear returned and started speaking in quick, deep-sounding utterances to my caretaker. They locked eyes with me and pointed upriver. I looked in that direction and pointed that way as well, and they grunted at me. When I turned back to them, they were already striding back to the forest, and they were gone. I was sitting in the fragrant circle for a while, waiting to see if they would return, when I heard voices coming from the river. Before I could gather the strength to stand, 2 people in an inflatable raft came into view. I yelled help, and they stopped, just watching me. I yelled that I was hurt, pointing to my head and ankle, and they quickly paddled to shore. They loaded me into their raft, and I left my gear behind. During the extraction trip, my rescuers asked me about what happened. I told them everything except for my hairy rescuers. It was crazy enough that they saw me sitting among territory piles. I didn't want them to think I had completely lost my mind. I know my experience was unique compared to what other people have experienced with these hairy humans. Maybe the group I encountered was a more advanced group of so-called Bigfoots, but to me they will always be hairy humans. They rescued me from the river, they fed me, they kept me warm. They even protected me in their strange way. If that doesn't make them more human than beast, I don't know what will. Well everyone, thanks for listening to Squatchable's Campfire Stories. Let us know what you think of this story in the comments below, and we'll see you there.